What's up, everyone? Uh, Welcome to Hot Wax. Kurt Finn Music. Today, we're going to be discussing a very groundbreaking first album, and that is the 1990 release from the Black Crowes, "Shake Your Money Maker." I mean, when this album came out in 1990, I kind of feel like it just, you know, there wasn't a lot of rock and roll out. I mean, I think you had like, Guns N' Roses, maybe Tesla or Great White. I mean, most of the rock and roll had already come before us. It was, our mom and dad's rock and roll, or uncles, or, older brother or something. You had your Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, obviously, and, bands like that, the Allman Brothers, ZZ Top. I mean, the classic rock bands that we all fell in love with. But, when we were born, those bands were just starting out. At least I was. So by the time the 80s came, like the Doors and all those bands had already, basically it came and went. And rock and roll was kind of overshadowed by, you had heavy metal, going on. You had the 80s thing. And grunge was starting to come, on pretty strong. And then the Black Crowes came out. And, a little backstory on this album. I had actually heard some music from this album. As the story goes, I believe my sister was working in, she could have been somewhere in Carbondale or Southern California or something like that. And the band came through, and I believe she sent me the cassette tape. And there was like maybe 4 or 5 songs on it. I think it had like Twice as Hard, Jealous Again, Struttin' Blues, and Thick and Thin. And I was automatically blown away. I was like, holy fuck, this is some of the best shit I've ever heard. And this is right now. I think it was like 1989 when I first heard it. Fast forward a little while later, after burning the cassette reels out on that tape, you turn on MTV. It was big on MTV and the radio, and you hear Twice as Hard, Jealous Again, and She Talks to Angels. Those were huge hits. I mean, undeniable. Chris and Rich were just, starting out very young. Chris's voice is very crisp, very brash. I mean, even some of this album is a little punk rock. I mean, you think of like, Could I Have Been So Blind, or Thick and Thin, something like that. It was punk. A lot of people, some people say that the Black Crowes really got noticed by playing a Stooges song on the corner. But what this album did for me as like, as a young kid, I was already, starting to change and dress a certain way, grow my hair a little bit longer, and open shirts and jewelry, kind of this Morrison, Robert Plant type, Keith Richards, we were, not wearing sneakers anymore, as cowboy boots, and the jeans were tighter, and necklaces, and, the hair was getting longer. And the Black Crowes were ours, you know what I mean? It was like, kind of gave us, me at least, kind of gave me a fucking attitude. Like, fuck you, man. I mean, we've got rock and roll. This is happening right now. I mean, we had attitude, we had hips, we had ass. We wanted to shake. I mean, it changed my guitar playing, kind of changed the way I went about things. Kind of went about things with a new rock and roll attitude. Like, hey, I'm not from the 60s, I was born in the 70s, but you know what I mean? This is 1990, and, we're coming of age and, becoming, our own thing. And the Black Crowes were our own thing. This lineup was Chris and Rich, obviously, on the brothers, and then Steve Gorman on drums, which was in the band for most of their, time, and not anymore, but he was probably the longest tenured. And guitarist Jeff Chase, and bass player Johnny Colt. The cool thing about this record is if you look in, the guy that played piano on some of the songs is a guy by the name of Chuck Leavell. Chuck Leavell played with the Allman Brothers for quite a good time. And also, I believe still now is the musical director of the Rolling Stones. So the Black Crowes having Chuck Leavell on this album was great for them. But this album was so brash. I mean, it was kind of had that attitude. Chris Robinson was in the news for kind of, being rock and roll, for being a nonviolent hippie band. They were kind of like, fuck you, we'll kick your ass, type of attitude, because we're the Black Crowes, we're rock and roll. And me and some of my friends kind of adapted that attitude as well. Like, it's us against the world, kind of gave me a new, I don't know, Shake Your Money Maker kind of gave me a new confidence in life, with girls, or, walking around school, or just anything. We dressed different, we talked different, we had our own thing. We were, like, we wanted to look like the Black Crowes. We wanted to be like the Black Crowes. And Shake Your Money Maker was a big part of that. When like listening to Jealous Again has that, Tumbling Dice, that Stonesy feel, you know. And I mean, hard to handle, you know, the Otis Redding cover, obviously, and Stare It Cold, all these songs. But, you know, the girls started changing too. The girls started listening to the Black Crowes as well, and they kind of took on this new rock and roll persona as well that, you know, kind of took away the vibrato of that metal kind of thing. You know, it was kind of a more sultry rock and roll. We all kind of adapted it. Gave me like a new confidence in life, you know, listening to Chris sing and listening to Rich's guitars. It was like, you know, yeah, man, we've got something to say. We have our own brand of rock and roll. This isn't your mom's rock and roll. This isn't your parents' rock and roll. You know, this is our fucking rock and roll. You know, and Shake Your Moneymaker, I kind of feel like is that first record from that era that was like rock and roll. You know, every time I put it on, I kind of remember the first time I've ever heard the Black Crowes, and I've been listening to the Black Crowes, I mean, for years. I mean, their new album, you know, Happiness Bastards, kind of has that. They kind of went back to this type of feel, but Rich's guitar playing in this record, I really kind of gravitate towards too. The Telecasters. Although it was said Jeff Chase didn't play a lot of the leads, there was kind of another guitar player. Later on, Mark Ford would join the band and Eddie Harsh, but this is Chuck Leavell and you know, that very early raw Black Crowes lineup. You know, Rich, I think, was 19 years old in this. So, you know, for me, this record was just so pinnacle, so important for the music industry and the way that music was heading. You know, music could be sexy, music could be brash, music could kick your ass without having to be misogynistic and be a fucking hard ass. It was like ass kicking, you know, boot shaking, earthquake and rock and roll. And it was ours. Again, it like belonged to us. You know, it wasn't, you know, and it still does to a certain way. You know, Chris and Rich are still out fucking doing it. So, you know, in 1990, like I said, there wasn't a lot of rock and roll to choose from that wasn't new. You know, you had Aerosmith was obviously still putting out records, and yeah, Guns N' Roses was a rock and roll band. They had that Mick and Keith, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry persona. You know, but I think, you know, the Black Crowes kind of, you know, really did it. You know, they were kind of that band. You know, they were a real rock and roll band. And Shake Your Moneymaker is a real rock and roll album. You know, this is the limited edition green vinyl, but pick this one up too. It's worth a listen. It's the Black Crowes Shake Your Moneymaker Live. This just came out about a year ago. This is, you know, Chris and Rich, you know, back at it. It's Shake Your Moneymaker Live in its entirety. And then, you know, the other sides are, you know, obviously classic Black Crowes tunes. But, you know, in 1990, this was such an important album to me, you know, Shake Your Moneymaker. Looking at the liner notes, reading the lyrics, just looking at the way that they looked. I mean, it was admiration and adoration, you know. I mean, this is what we knew we were going to do. And it's kind of where I took my music, and it's kind of where I took my inspirations from as a young guy walking through the hallways of my high school, kind of with a chip on my shoulder. Like, you know, fuck you, man. I've got a Black Crowes jacket on, and I'm into the Black Crowes, and there's nothing you can do about it. It was our rock and roll, and it still is. And I'm, you know, listening to it now, I still can remember how great it made me feel to hear rock and roll that was coming out of my speakers, on my television, on MTV, and on my record player that belonged to me. That wasn't from the 60s or 70s. It wasn't something that I, you know, looked at like, wow, that was really cool. It was not Jim Morrison. It's Chris fucking Robinson and Rich. So, you know, go ahead and try to give it a listen to tonight. Black Crowes, Shake Your Moneymaker. If you've got anything you'd like to comment, go ahead and comment in the comment section. I'll let you know what the next album's going to be. Spin what you love what you spin. It's Kurt Finn, Hot Vinyl, signing off. See you next time, kids.